Hey everybody, this is Dan from Mechanical Malarkey. Today I'm going to show you how to replace the rear pads and rotors on a 2011 to 2017 Honda Odyssey. This is the style of rear rotor with the internal drum parking brake, so this will be similar for other vehicles with that type of parking brake. These are the main tools that you'll need to do your rear brakes. You'll need a socket or wrenches to get the bolts out. You'll need an impact driver and a hammer to get the rotor screws out. You'll need a flat blade screwdriver to back the parking brake shoes out. For pushing in the rear caliper, I use a giant pair of channel lock pliers, and you'll want a wire brush to clean up the caliper bracket. You'll also want some disposable gloves, shop towels, brake clean or other solvent, and some brake grease. Lift the car, put it on jack stands, and remove the rear wheels. So we'll start by taking off the caliper. There's two 12mm bolts. And now pull the caliper off and move it to the side. And take the brake pads out. If they're seized in there, you can wait till you get the bracket off and hammer them out. And now to remove the bracket, there are two 17mm bolts. And take the bracket off. We'll clean it up in a minute. So this is the style of rear rotors that have the parking brake as an internal drum system inside the rotor. So before I take off the drum, I always want to back off the shoes so they don't interfere with trying to get the rotor off. To do that, there's this little hole with this rubber seal in it. So first I remove the seal. Usually a screwdriver helps to pull it out, or I just push it all the way in and remove it later when I get the rotor off. So if you look in the hole, you can see a little gear in there. So you want to reach in there with your screwdriver and turn it down, and that will back the parking brake shoes away from the rotor. And then to remove the rotor, there's the rotor screw. Usually all you need is an impact driver and a hammer like this. And then remove the rotor. You might need to use a hammer if it's rusted on there. This time we're lucky. You might recognize this parking brake setup as similar to what traditional drum brakes look like. The only difference is there's no hydraulic wheel cylinder in there. There's only the cable activation. So while you have the rotor off, this is a good time to check out the condition of the parking brake shoes and clean everything up and lubricate it. Everything looks pretty good on this. Everything moves easily enough, so I think we're good to put on the new rotor. So now get your new rotor, and you usually want to spray it off because there's usually some sort of oil or anti-rust solution on there. Sometimes you might need to clean rust off the hub. This one's pretty good. Sometimes I also spray some grease on it to help get the rotor off later if I need to. This one's not too bad, so I'm just going to put the new rotor on. And make sure you line up the rotor screw hole with the hole in the hub where the rotor screw goes. You don't need to go too tight on the rotor screw. All it's doing is holding the rotor in place while you work on the brakes. And don't forget, now you need to push the parking brake shoes back out to the drum. So this time turn it the opposite direction. When you can't turn it anymore, and you can't turn the rotor either, it means you push them all the way out, so you need to back them off just a little bit. I usually do about 4 or 5 strokes, maybe a little more, and then it should spin freely enough, but then the parking brake will be able to engage pretty quickly. And then don't forget to put the rubber seal back in the hole. Now let's clean up the caliper bracket. Just you can use a screwdriver to pop off the hardware in here. Usually at the shop I'll use a die grinder to clean up all the rust in here, but since I don't have an air compressor here, I'll just have to use a wire brush. Most aftermarket pads come with a new set of hardware. If they don't, you should try to get some. If not, clean up the old ones as best you can. Next, you want to lubricate the slider pins. So pull them out, pull the boot back, and wipe them off with a rag. If it's really old grease, you might need to use some solvent on there too. Then spread some brake grease onto the slider pins. You don't want to use just any grease because some grease can't stand up to the high temperatures of brake parts. Sometimes you have to pull the boot back to get some air out of where the pin goes in. And now it's ready to be reinstalled on the car. Now we need to push the caliper piston back in. For these rear ones, I usually just use a large pair of channel locks. And now put the caliper bracket back on. Before you put your new brake pads in, Take note of whether they have the squealer on them or not, because some aftermarket ones don't come with it pre-installed. So you want to install it on the same side that the original one was on. It varies depending on the car, whether it's going to be on the top or the bottom, but it's always on the inside pad. Put some brake grease on the ends of the pads and slip them into the holders. Then put the caliper back on. There you go, that's one side done. The other side is just the same. Make sure you pump up the brakes before you move the car. And there you go. That's how you replace the rear brakes on a 2011 to 2017 Honda Odyssey. If you like the video, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and read the blog at mechanicalmonarchy.com. Thanks for watching.